Hi there. Thanks for downloading, listening to, and watching the Lean Into Art Cast, a show where a couple of visual storytellers, people who tell stories with images, communicate visually, get together and talk about what it takes to do that kind of thing. All the stuff like the ideas that go into making things, the ideas that go into organizing one's projects, the lifestyle that goes with being a visual storyteller. We think hard about all these different things, so you will too. My name is Jerzy Drozd. I'm a cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hey, Jerzy. I am Rob Stenzinger, a user experience and game designer. So more on the interactive storytelling side of things. But I don't know. Is there really a passive versus interactive type of storytelling? I'm not as solid on that anymore.
It's interactive all the way down.
I think it is.
Hey, Rob, good to see you again. We do
Great
the show
to see you, Jerzy.
Every week, every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, streamed live on YouTube, then collected as a podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And every week we come back again and again with another idea for things to think hard about in terms of visual storytelling. And what do we got this week?
Well, this week, you brought up the interesting idea of talking about freeware. And basically, I think one particular tool would get a lot of our attention because, well, when we make art that's two-dimensional or illustrative, and we can talk about tools that are the physical traditional media, and we have talked about that, especially when we explore mini comics. But you end up in the world of, and that's inexpensive, right? Not quite free. You can really make it a point to make physical media things on the cheap with really easily available tools or whatnot. But it's less easy to do that when you go toward the digital world. And or actually it's not as well. Or is it? Because there are some pretty darn great, inexpensive or actually free tools to help create digital art now.
Yeah, thank goodness for that, right? And this topic occurred to me for a couple of reasons. One, I was going through our archives looking at what we'd been doing over the last 6 months with the show, and I did come across episode 203, Old Gear, Open Source, New Purpose, where we were talking about extending the lives of different kinds of equipment, getting use out of open source software, exploring different kinds of different tools that are available to us in that realm. And it's worth going back and listening to. We'll link to it in the show notes, episode 203 of Lean Into Art. But also, next week, I'm starting a new round of classes, comics classes, and one of them is a Clip Studio Paint class. But the first 4 weeks, first 3 weeks, I actually train the students in Medibank Paint, primarily because it's a fairly... If you've spent any kind of time in any kind of graphic software, it's a fairly intuitive interface. It's simplified down to what's essential for drawing, and it's free. I mean, free in terms of it costs nothing to use, and it's on every platform. It's on Mac, it's on PC, it's on Android, it's on iOS. So whatever the kids have at home, they should be able to have some kind of access to it, right? Because even though Clip Studio Paint is... what is it, $40-something, and then it goes on sale every once in a while for even cheaper than that. That's not an insubstantial amount of money to a 14-year-old, right? And also, ever since I think I've made a lot of noise about Clip Studio Paint and how much I love it, but ever since they did the iPad version with that monthly fee, I'm like, ugh, I don't know if I'm so eager to talk about Clip Studio Paint and extol its virtues anymore, because if that's the area or the direction they're headed, I don't know if I like that, Rob.
I know it's really hard. And as a software developer, I mean, I get it. The ecosystem surrounding releasing an app, it's the circumstances are few when you can build a piece of software, put it into the world, and have it not get sort of eroded and fall apart at some point because of changes and upgrades to operating systems and things that you depend on, the elements you use to construct that app. And now what? Now here you have a broken thing in the world that maybe you got paid for doing, but you got paid for it a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago,
Right.
10 years ago. And then now what? Like, do you update it for free? And how does that work? It's not an easy problem. And I know you're not just saying I have no empathy for software developers.
No, because we're gonna make noise about our Patreon later.
Right on.
So it's not that I have no empathy. It's just that it made me put the brakes on, going like, whoa, I have to pay attention to what you guys are doing now because I don't know what's next.
Which is smart, and that's something we've talked about too. What was the episode where? It was the episode where we talked about the sustainability of our tools and hey, what happened with Patreon and that sort of that blip on the radar.
That's right.
The numbers escaping me, but that kind of thinking. It's nice to have backup tools.
That's right. And also, like it's fun, at least for me, it's fun to keep, when I hear about a new tool, to play around with it in a playful way and see if it has any, well, we've talked about this before, like auditioning and hiring tools. Mm-hmm. And I like to playfully audition with tools to see like, okay, well, do you solve any unique problems? If so, then maybe you're going to go into my tool set. And Medibank Paint has been one of those ones where it's been loaded on all of my machines for a long time. I don't use it every day, but I like to use it fairly frequently on a semi-regular basis. But with that, do you want to go straight to on the ground and start demoing Medibank Paint?
Yes, that sounds great. Let's go there.
Okay, well then here we go. Here comes the music. I'm just going to keep leaning on this one because it makes you happy.
Let's find the Dragon Balls. Let's go find them right now.
All right, let me turn on my screen share.
Okay.
And we'll start playing around with Medibang Paint. Okay, what order was I going to go in with this? Where do we want to start with this? How about, and for the folks who are listening to the audio only, I'll do my best to describe what I'm, pointing out, but this is going to be one where,
and I'll comment too. I know that you're doing the demo, and I'm here to help with adding some soundtrack.
Great, thank you. Okay, so here we have the interface, and if you've used things like Photoshop, if you've used any kind of even I would say what was that one sprite maker, that online sprite maker that you can make sprites for Unity games. I forget what it was called. Not Pixelmator, was it?
No, that's an actual Photoshop competitor on Mac.
Okay.
It's it's escaping me. But yeah, I mean you have a metaphor that is sort of you're a drafts person, you have your table and all your tools next to you, and there's sort of analogs for, drawing straight lines, curvy lines, drawing lines with more expression or simpler, drawing with shapes, doing selections, manipulating selections, this kind of stuff. But it goes quickly from the physical world metaphor into you have the magical, you're casting digital art spells at a certain point that you just start remembering their symbols.
Right. So, so over here on the left, and I can actually, can I do this? Yes, I can annotate this with my fancy Microsoft operating system here. So over here, right, we have our toolbar where we have our paintbrush tool, our eraser, shape tools. You can make squares, you can make filled shapes. You got the paint bucket tool, gradient tool, selection tools, right? Like there's your rectangular selection, your marquee lasso, magic wand, type tool, eyedropper, hand tool to move around the canvas, right? And then over down here, so that's your sort of your first tier tools. And whenever you change these tools, this area up here changes. Your options, let me undo that right here actually. Your options up here change. So the metaphor, and again, I don't feel like I have to belabor this metaphor too much with our particular audience, but in my classrooms I always point out this is kind of like drawing and driving at the same time, because you have to keep appraised of a lot of different interfaces and meters and dials, right? So I'll demonstrate that real quick. So right now I've got my brush tool, and up top we have these different rulers. So for instance, I can turn on this particular ruler here, which makes parallel lines. So now it will only let me draw in parallel and perpendicular lines, or I can change it to a grid. So I can draw perfect squares, right? Vanishing point, create like a 1-point perspective. Let me zoom out a little bit. And so it'll only let me draw in lines that converge on that vanishing point and so on. I can shut that off by hitting the little, anti sign right there. So those options change. Also, up here on the top when I'm drawing with the brush tool, there's the option to either anti-alias, turn that on or off, which creates like the metaphor of like blurring the line, make it look more analog versus making it look more crisp and digital. And then you have correction. You can have, whoa, I didn't know Medibank Paint added that many levels of correction. So there's 40 levels on there now, Holyoke, Massachusetts. So what that does is, like, let's say I'm drawing a curve, I can add a level of correction, which will use the processor in the computer to like interpret what I'm trying to do and will smooth my lines, as it were. And the more correction you add, the slower the lines tend to happen. Let me delete my canvas real quick and do that again. So here's, like, I'm trying to draw a straight line without correction on, turn correction on all the way to 40. And you can see you get like a slightly stabilized line, right? So these options change, though, when I switch to, say, Paint Bucket. Now I just switched to Paint Bucket tool. Now we have a whole range of different options up top, right? The Paint Bucket can reference the canvas or it can reference the layer. In other words, if I make lots of layers, and we'll talk more about layer palette in just a second. I'm going to breeze through these very quickly.
This is a great overview. Yeah.
I'm going to draw an angry guy on this layer, and underneath, I'm going to draw part of the guy's body. Oh, this is such a good drawing. I'm going to win lots of awards.
This is This guy, you recreated Michelangelo's David so fast.
Yeah, where's my Eisner? So we can see that like these two pieces of the drawing are in different layers, but if I go to layer 2 and I have the paint bucket set to reference the entire canvas, then it's going to interact with all of these pieces as if they're all on the same layer. But if I have it set to reference the layer, it's only going to interact with whatever's on that layer.
Wonk.
So,
yep. And now, so you went from filling just the discrete torso and hands and arms to the entire canvas, which is that's always a fun surprise. Thankfully, there is undo.
Yes, and I forget how many undos, but you have multiple undos. And then when you have the paint bucket tool selected, you also have the option to change the amount of expansion that the fill does. So like if I set it to expand to 0 and I go to set it to reference the whole canvas and I go to fill in this guy's body, we're going to see this white ghosting there because it's going to stop at the moment it detects another color of ink, in this case the gray anti-aliasing of these pencil lines. But if I set it to expand 2 pixels, it's going to expand, come on, there we go, underneath that line a little bit more. Let's expand it even more. So it fills to the line and then some.
If you had anti-aliasing shut off, that would be yet a different situation, right?
That would be yes, absolutely be a different situation, right?
Might be able to get by without expanding.
Maybe, yeah. If you had like really crisp, perfectly non-anti-aliased lines, I got to get rid of this guy. This is so not attractive. Okay. And then, like, okay, so then you have, like, the selection tool. The selection tool in Medibank Paint, they use a slightly different visual cue than they do in things like Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop, in that when I make a selection, it automatically creates a mask so if I try to draw in here, it's only going to let me draw where the selection is active, but it creates this purple mask to, like, give me an indication of what is selected and what is not. Which actually is kind of a really nice visual cue that I wish the other apps would do. Maybe you can do that in a setting in Photoshop.
So much more contrast besides the marching ants of the marquee. It's pretty obvious now where you can draw.
The quick Command D shuts that off, right? And so this is where you can mask out certain areas of the canvas so that you only can draw in those areas or fill in those areas, like so. Anything else that we wanted to cover on this? Eraser tool. Neat thing about Medibank Paint and Clip Studio Paint that I really, really enjoy is, yes, you have the eraser tool, but you also have transparent ink. So I can set over here in the color palette right next to, and I should mark this up real quick for everybody to see. Right here is sort of like our second tier of palettes to pay attention to, and here's our third tier right here. And so we have our color picker, we have our brush settings where we can change the size of the brush, the opacity of the brush, and then a whole mess of settings right down here. And then down here is where we can organize our brushes and select different kinds of brushes. Over here is our navigator. This tells us gives us a full size view of the canvas and shows us where we are in relation to everything else. And then our layer palette. Most of us know what a layer is, right? Different layers of transparency on top of each other, and you can recombine them in different ways and make them interact with one another in interesting ways to create really cool effects. And then down here's a reference pane where we can actually load reference images if we wanted to like work off of something. You know, I want to draw like a very specific kind of duck. I'll put the picture there, and then I can keep looking at it without having to have it open up in another canvas or another screen, right? So
interesting. There's and right now you are working on a Windows tablet, but yet Medibang could run just about anywhere, and most of, if not all, these tools are on all the different versions.
That's correct. And
Okay.
in a minute, after I do a few more demonstrations, I'm going to show how it looks on an Android phone. I have a Galaxy Note 4 here. With the stylus, and so we can. I'm going to load up some files on that, so we can see how like the interface looks different, but how it operates pretty much the same. Which is one of the reasons that I really dig it. Okay, oops, what did I just do? I was in the wrong window. I'm hitting delete to clear my canvas. So another neat thing in the layer palette that it has is you have the option to create a 1BP. What does this stand for? A bitmap layer, and then like a single color layer. So like you have like a full color layer. Let me see if I can mark this up. I'm gonna annotate this again. Down here in your layer palette at the bottom, you have these three different options. This creates a full color layer. This creates an 8 BPP layer. It's sort of like a single color anti-alias layer, and then you have a single color bitmap layer. What does that mean? So let's say I'm going to make a penciling layer. I'm going to change my ink color to black. And I'll choose this 8 BPP layer, and I'm going to double click right here where it says, see where it says like there's a little black box and then the number 8 on the layer that's listed as layer 5 or whatever. I'm going to double click that, and it gives me a color picker here. And what I can do is I can actually change the color to, let's say like I use like a rough approximation of the non-photo blue that I use, and I'll call this layer pencils, and hit OK. And so now, even if I'm drawing with black ink, it's going to display that ink as this blue that I selected by double-clicking on that little box inside the layer palette. And I could reassign that color after the fact. So let's say, and I'll just demo this real fast. Let's say, because I when I'm penciling my comics digitally, I tend to do like a really rough layer. So here, I'll do cat and cat. And
That's
I'll do like
really interesting how much I have underappreciated. I've used Medibang for a number of years now, I enjoy how it prioritizes the sketching versus the detailed comic workflows type stuff, right? Which is what I absolutely really enjoy out in Clip Studio Paint. But this is really interesting where yeah, I had no idea you can essentially remap the display of a of the paint of the color that you're currently drawing with, but yet of course it's not affecting the color you're drawing with. It's the, you know, whatever color you chose is still there.
So let's say I do my pencil roughs, and now I'm going to make another pencil layer, and let's call this like pencil finishes. And I'm going to make that color, again, like a dark blue. But as what happens when you start layering your pencils, it can start to get kind of messy, right? You can start to lose track of what you've penciled, what you haven't. So now you just go back to the layer below, remap the color to red, right? And it just, oops, I didn't hit OK. Oh, hear that? There we go, hit OK. And so now I've got I just converted those pencils to red with the flick of a switch rather than having to do like a lock transparent pixels and fill it in. And so now I can go in and do my second round of pencils over top. And as I tell my students, the reason I sketch is I have to draw all the wrong lines to find the right lines. And then once I found the right lines, that's what I go in on my second round of pencils and trace over.
That's a great way to think of it. I mean, I think I'm noticing that too, going through revisions on my mini comic I'm working on, and just even the writing, where like I'm finding like just having an iterative approach benefits, I think, pretty much every aspect of the output.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Nate Marcel's in the chat and is asking, what can't this do? Import 3D objects and animation. If it can import 3D objects, I haven't found out how to do that yet, and I haven't tried to do animation. I don't think it can. I think this is really meant for illustration, 2D illustration first and foremost. I know Clip Studio Paint introduced animation into it, which I also haven't tried out myself, but and we just did an episode with Hannah O'Neill about animating in Photoshop. But the reason I like this is that it's a very no frills, very intuitive interface, very simple drawing program that does a really good job of what it's hired to do.
Well, and also, how do these? Okay, you've used lots of different digital drawing apps. What about the feel of just how how your lines are expressed? Putting down a line in this app.
It feels pretty good, both on tablets and on PCs, like on desktop computers. It's not as nice as Clip Studio Paint. Like Clip Studio Paint feels like the most natural I've ever felt drawing on a screen. Like it's as close to paper as I've ever experienced. I would say this is like there's like just like a little bit of drop off on some of the lines that I wish it didn't have. It feels, if I could describe it, I would say it feels like a little chunky. It feels a little chunky when you draw with it. But for sketching out ideas, for doing rough pencils, for capturing stuff, it's more than enough. As a matter of fact, it's astonishing to me that I can sit in my car and sketch out ideas in this app and then go home and open it up on my desktop within seconds without having to do any kind of like funny like trade handoffs with the application, with the file. And we'll talk about that in a second. I want to blast through a couple more things with this real quick. Making brushes. So I'm working with a custom brush that I built just this afternoon, which mimics sort of like a very soft lead pencil on a grainy piece of paper. But down here in the brush palette, there's a lot of brushes that come pre-installed, and you can download brushes like at a variety of sources. Let me get the Sumi brush. That one's really nice too. What's going on? Did I grab ink? What's happening? Let's
Still
do
drawing
this.
on that.
Oh, I have white ink.
Right.
I have white ink selected. That's all. So this one like mimics some very natural media looks. Oh, come on. What's going on here? There we go. Let's see if I can zoom in on a little bit.
Okay.
And then
so
it's got like just like a little bit of texture to it.
It's got some texture in it, and it simulates running out of ink.
Yeah, it does. It fades out at the end. The G pen is pretty nice, but just the simple pen tool is very expressive. Like you can get like a lot of good line value out of this. Like I'm going to start with like a very razor thin, and you can see you can start with a very feather touch and get pretty darn thick with it. But then there's even some decent watercolor brushes, digital watercolor. But then I even made like my own custom watercolor brush. Where is it? Is it this one? Yeah. A little bit more of like a natural media kind. But then there's acrylic brushes. But making your own brushes is actually pretty simple. So, and this is, again, the software is set up to just help you do it very simply. So I've opened up, here's like a little piece of foliage that I grabbed out of Clip Studio Paint. This came from the materials palette. And if you down here in the bottom of the brush palette, this little button right there, it looks like a little page with the transparency icon inside of it. And I'm going to click that, and there's an option to choose from canvas. And what I'm doing is I'm making a new brush from whatever it sees on the canvas. And I hit OK, OK. And now it gives me these options. It's starting to make this new brush. Let's just call this Foliage 3. And you have the option to make it a bitmap watercolor, which means that it's going to interact with other colors when you paint with it. A scatter, which actually randomizes it, and a scatter watercolor, which means that it randomizes it and it interacts with other colors. And then there's the pattern brush as well. We'll just stick with scatter right now. And you can change the width of the brush. The minimum width is like how small it could possibly get. You can set it so that it's like a fairly thick start line, or you can have it so that with like the slightest bit of pressure, it'll be a very thin line. You can set it to have size. Let me mark these up on the screen again. You can set it to have size by pressure or opacity by pressure or both, right? Let's turn up the scatter strength, and let's turn up the particle size just a little bit. Turn down the particle randomness, and let's play with the rotation settings a little bit here, these knobs, and let's turn off color jitter. Turn off all the way, and hit OK. And now, let me make this bigger. I'm going to make the particle size bigger, and you can just double click on that brush in order to like change the settings on it. Let's turn down the scatter strength a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Come on, a little bit more. Okay.
So it's a less dense cloud now from the settings that you were adjusting.
Yeah, I got to turn it down, and then you need to hit OK. And so now I've got a really fast. I'm going to just go back to my untitled and clear this. I can make, foliage, very quickly paint in a tree. I'm not doing a very awesome job of it, but you get the idea.
Yeah, very interesting. Because, that did not take very long to make that brush, and here you go.
Right, and I can zoom in a little bit. You can see that it's making random branches. And I would probably play with these settings like quite a bit for a while to get it exactly where I want it.
It would make sense. And so once you have a brush you like, are you able to then port it between your desktop and your phone?
Thank you for asking. Oh. Yes, can you then take it between apps or instances of your of Medibang? Mm-hmm. So if you make it, so the app is free, and as far as I can tell, the monetization method is they want you to sign up for an account with them and do cloud storage with them and share your work in the Medibang marketplace. Like you can actually make custom brushes and like distribute them amongst other Medibang users. And I don't know if there's other like premium services that they offer. I haven't been approached by their application for anything like that before, but let's go ahead and use some. I'm going to go ahead and put in some transparent ink to mess with the shape of this tree. Anyway, so yes,
transparent ink, that's a very handy tool. Again, like this is it's like you get to eat away as an eraser, but in the form of your current brush, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So okay, so then let's say I make all these custom brushes, which I did. If you have an account, if you sign up for an account, in the top left of your screen is this little cloud with a check mark in it. I'm going to hit that, and it pulls up this Medibang Cloud Service dialog. And there's two buttons here. You can download your settings from your account, or you can upload your current settings. I'm going to hit upload, and it's saying, you sure you want to save your cloud settings? Yes, I do. And it uploads those. Okay, uploading brush materials. Uploading brush settings, 100%. There we go. All right, so now I think I need to pull out my camera and show it on the phone, and then we can move on to 10,000 feet up. What do you say?
Oh, well, that sounds great. This is
okay.
Yeah.
So let me get my camera out.
Just to clarify too, while you're working on setting up, is this something that you paid for? This aspect of the app?
No, I did not pay for this. I just signed up for an account. So, I mean, they have my information as far as like what my username, password, and email address is. So I do get marketing emails from them occasionally, but I have not paid for this cloud service at all yet.
Gotcha. And I do see ads within the app occasionally as well, right? Okay.
That is true. Let me pull up Medibang on my phone and point my camera down at it, and I'm going to switch from my camera or my screen sharing to my camera. Stop. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, can we see my
Yeah.
phone
Okay.
now?
I see your phone. Yep.
Okay. All right, let me
Is that that's like a Galaxy Note
Galaxy
2 or
Note
3?
4.
4. Wow.
Galaxy Note 4. Okay. So I'm gonna hit this is what the dialog you get once you launch the software, and I'll make a new canvas, create, and then I'll go to this button here in the let's see if you can see it
Yep, we can
in
see it
the
lower
bottom left
It's a hamburger button
uh,
style.
hamburger button, and then I will hit sync. And I can sync my brushes, sync my palettes if I have a custom palettes, and then sync my materials. Materials are like a bank of reusable stock art that you can create for yourself, or download from Medibank's services. They have like a whole bunch of like stock art that you can pull in there. Renderings of rooms, of buildings, of trees, and backgrounds and things like that. I'm just gonna hit sync brushes for now. It'll take a second. Processing. While that loads
waiting for
over my Wi-Fi.
And okay, it runs on Android. I have used this as I've mentioned, just because I like how the brushes feel, and it was always a competition to me between using Medibank Paint or Procreate before Clip Studio Paint came out on the iPad. And yeah, now I've so far Clip Studio Paint is what I've been using, but I do debate is like, is that a fair value, the recurring charge? I don't know. So far I'm sticking with it. But
well, I have thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on that, and I think I need to use it on the iPad to see. But anyway, so let's see if my brush is loaded. And so I open up the brush palette, which is the little artistic palette there, and I'm going to scroll down through all my brushes, and there it is, Foliage 3, the one I just made. And
oh, that's sweet.
My ink color is set to blue. But
okay.
Zoom in, and there it is. Within seconds, I mean literally seconds, I have it loaded up on my phone now. And I can go grab one of my other pens. Let's go with how about, well, let's go with pencil. It doesn't matter. And then I can draw my branches and so on. But yes, I have some of the desktop images that I've made for my Boulder and Fleet Patreon began as sketches on the phone app or the tablet app, like just on the Android application.
That's
you can see that
pretty neat workflow. Yeah,
we see that
on your Galaxy Note 4.
And the interface is simplified to get the heck out of your way, so you're getting maximum, canvas size, but all of the exact same tools are there. So this is as good as the desktop application, but it's just running on your phone. Granted, using it on a phone that has pressure sensitivity makes a big difference. Because I can, right? See that?
Oh yeah, it's a first-class citizen with that the phone you're using. I mean, you have it has a digitizer built in. As much as I like the iPad Pro and the Pencil, I can't use the Apple Pencil on my phone, and that's a bummer. Whereas you're not stuck with that here.
Right. That's why I got this. I got it used. You can get these Galaxy Note 4s used on eBay for like $125 now. They're compared to what they were when they first came out. That's a bargain to have a fairly robust digital sketchbook that's in your pocket, right?
Now, just kind of relating to what we'll dig into in 10,000 Feet Up, and the next part of the show where we ask a little more of the hows and whys kind of questions. I'm okay. Not that I'm stunned by the power of the tool Medibank Paint provides, yet it's cross-platform as possibly almost as you can be, right? I don't know if it runs on Linux also, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could run it on Linux with Wine or another like Windows container kind of thing. So that's a lot of resources to build like this cross-platform thing. How do they make it sustainable? And then other tools, right? When we're tapping into these freeware things, and picking free options, the free is exciting at first, and especially if it delivers on meeting a need. It's like, oh, this totally qualifies as fitting in my toolbox. But then it's like, how long can it last if it's free?
Right. Yeah. They might be Giants fan in the audience, might be thinking of that track off of Miscellaneous T, but how do they make any money? That don't make no sense. Somebody, Nate's asking in the chat, like, what's this glove on my hand? I'm super into 90s X-Men. No, it is it's a smudge guard glove, but it also makes it so that when you're drawing on glass, your hand just glides across it so that it doesn't get, if I were to take this off and draw and rest my hand on the glass, it could get like a little bit of friction. It slows me down. This glove helps it so that when I'm drawing on a glass surface, I just glide across it. Yeah, but Rob, you teed us up for the second half, right? Talking about like, okay, how do they make it sustainable, and how should we think about that when engaging with it, right? Because as we were talking about earlier, it's like I get really excited about tools when they solve a lot of problems for me, and I go and I scream from the hilltop to all my friends, "Oh, you got to try it! It's so good!" And then suddenly the business model changes, right? Mm-hmm. And then I have to go, "Oh, wait." So yeah, how do we think about that, and how do we think about evaluating that when trying out new products, right? New tools. All right. Good. Do you want to talk about that in about 1 minute and 30 seconds?
Sounds excellent. Let's do that. But first,
we're going to take a break for 1 minute and 30, and we're going to talk about some people who make the show possible, and those people happen to be the folks who support us on Patreon. Yes, patreon.com/leanintoart is the website. And what is it? It's a way for you to give us a monthly upvote. If you believe in us and you believe in the work that we do and the thinking that we do, a great way to let us know that it means something to you is to go to patreon.com/leanintoart. And we want to thank 5 people who have been supporting us for, some time now. First up, we have Angela Mitchell. You can find Angela on Twitter at AngieMakesStuff. By the way, we always mention the Twitter handles, but we rarely mention why. And the reason being is that these people are excited enough about supporting the show financially, then they're probably somebody you would get along with. Because if you're getting something out of this, they're getting something out of this. You guys probably have a lot in common. So that's why we're saying go follow Angie on Twitter. Angie Makes Stuff on Twitter. We also want to thank Mike. Thank you for believing in us and the work that we do. Also, Ben Odgren. You can find Ben on Twitter at Ben Odgren. And Kelly Ishikawa. Thank you, Kelly. You can find Kelly on Twitter at Kelly of Ishikawa. These will all be linked in the show notes, by the way. And finally, Becca Hilburn, longtime friend of the show, at Natto Soup on Twitter. And if you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/leanintoart, where you will find all of the shows we make, as well as the extra leans, the shows that we record in between these shows. Well, no, it used to be in between, right, Rob? But now it's monthly.
It did. Now we went back to the main show is every week. And then Extra Lean became a little extra special because now it is only available on Patreon. And if you go to patreon.com/leanintoart and subscribe to us, then you get this monthly extra show that becomes a little feed that is a private one where you can comment and chat back and forth among fellow leaners.
And we thank everybody who has been doing just that. It means a lot to us. All right. So let's hit the music for the second part of the show, shall we?
Yes.
All right. Something maybe a little bit more dramatic. Because we're going to dig into some heavy questions. It's time to stroke our beards a little bit. Even if you don't have one. Yeah, so where do you want to start with this? Like, I mean, is it as simple as, hey, look, if I don't got to pay anything out of pocket, then that's good enough for me, right?
Honestly, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's where you're at and what works for you, of course, I'm not here to make you worry, right? But I'm just sharing that I worry because I know what it's like to build and support an app and to keep it alive, and an open source app that is so useful that you know about also, right? That it has awareness, it has a community, and it has there's just an amazing volume of work there, that some apps are um uh, they're sustainable because they're an island of openness, and they're set up where with just enough rules so that to join this island of openness, there are principles for their project and how can you contribute and what have you, right? So you may go to, let's say, so one app that is similar to Medibank, similar to Clip Studio Paint, but I haven't used it much at all. It's called Krita, and but then there's others, of course, too. There's the GNU image manipulation program, GIMP, right, and others that have been around for years that are open in more ways, right? They're open source, they're free, and they all have some kind of community model where they may have a patron, right? Like maybe a corporate benefactor who has huge invested in that this thing better keep going because, you know, a movie studio is using it, right? And they've got they're just mitigating their business risk by saying, like, you know what, we'll fund a couple of developers for this thing. That happens in the open source world. And but then the free world, that's kind of similar, that's where Medibang is, right? Where Medibang is free, but it's not as open as it's not free and free and open source, right?
Right.
It's open enough as far as it doesn't trap your data, right? It uses
you can save your files to the cloud, but then you have access to them. But then it also invites you to, you should share them with our Medibank community. And there's this whole sharing, this closed sharing platform to share the work that you've been doing that they kind of encourage you to do, which you don't have to do in order to use the software. They don't prevent you, but yes, it feels very much like they're trying to build an ecosystem with that.
And you know, more power to them. They need some way to keep their app going. And I don't fully understand it. Like when I see the couple of ad units embedded in their app, and I think, does this perform? Because if I have this app, I probably already have a graphic tablet, but I don't know. Maybe I don't. And at least it's a super relevant object where it's like, if you don't have a graphic tablet, you're going to probably want one if you're using this app. And so here's a little banner with an Amazon link. Fair enough. But then their cloud aspect and their community, I'm a little puzzled. I haven't dug into it enough to say, like, oh, I see what they're doing there. It's a little fuzzy to me. Like, how are they making money off that?
Yeah, me too. I haven't done a deep dive to submit any art to it to see what it's about. I noticed that Samsung did a similar thing with their Note series. They did their own social network called. Have you seen this, Rob?
Wow, I did not know. Really?
There's their own social network for sharing work drawn on the Note series called PenUp, and it comes pre-installed on Galaxy Note phones. And I looked into it when it first launched. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, back when I was really excited about the Note 10.1. And it's interesting, but it was another one of those things where I spent a little bit of time there. I was like, I don't understand. I mean, I'm looking at just a gallery of other people and showing what they can do with the technology, which is nice, but it didn't feel like I was getting anything out of it other than looking at pretty things. So
yeah, but and how does that help them, right?
Right. I mean, I'm already there. I already have the Note. You got me in the door. So what else are you trying to? What other value are you extracting from me on that?
Yeah. So, and that's the puzzle of like, sometimes free. How free is it? And it's worth considering, and especially it's worth considering, not in a way to just, I don't know, just go collect every free resource you can, or be suspicious of free resources because, you know, that's not capitalist enough or whatever. It's just, but it's worth thinking about, because okay, this thing is going to be in your toolbox, and I assume you want to depend on the things in your toolbox, or at least depend enough.
I
And
should say,
yeah,
yes, you're reminding me of something, an important point that I neglected to make early on. One of the reasons that Medibank passed my test was
mm,
that it allows you to save in Photoshop format, which
hmm,
it's Photoshop, but Photoshop is accepted by a lot of graphics applications. Most image editing applications can accept PSD files. And so the moment, like the fact that it wasn't like, because it saves in what's called MDP format, which is actually pretty widely accepted. Like Fire Alpaca uses it,
that's
Layer Paint
right.
HD for Android uses it. So it's like, okay, that's pretty transferable to different applications. But once I saw, I was like, oh, you can save in PSD, you can open PSDs. Now this thing can actually interoperate with Clip Studio Paint or Manga Studio. And once that was there, I was like, okay, I can trust you now, right? I don't feel too trapped by this. Um, but I need to reopen. I need to load up Krita again because it's been a long time since I've used it. Um, and it looks like it's for Mac, PC, and Linux.
Mm-hmm. Looks very capable. I did a tiny bit of poking at it today. It seems to attempt to address comic workflow stuff, but with a masking approach, right? So instead of sort of the to me the app that addresses comic style digital workflow the best is Clip Studio Paint. It just first class citizen. Every darn design choice in that app is about making you successful at um, getting a comic art out the door, right? And then other apps have some affordances for it, but no one prioritizes it that high. But then in Krita, it's kind of like, yeah, we can kind of do that too, but it just provides like a masking template where you're working in one layer and it's just exposing the it doesn't it just the gutters are masked out so you don't see the
Oh,
uh,
okay, okay.
so it's like, man, that could work, but um mm, yeah. So, but it's intriguing. I don't know enough about it to really comment on it, other than it's shows potential. But are there any other free software that you've been using, and
Well,
and why?
so a while back when we did episode 203, we talked a little bit about Inkscape, um,
Mm-hmm.
which is a vector editing piece of software. And I remember saying something to the effect of, the interface is a little clunky and it's not ready to replace Adobe Illustrator for me. But I was playing with it because I want to replace Adobe Illustrator. Like on my PC, I don't have a license for the newest version of Illustrator, so I was like, well, rather than make that plunge and go back into the Adobe ecosystem, let's see if I can live outside of it a little bit. Let's see how far I can get without it, because I've been using those programs since 1995. I'm very very used to them, and they have grown, or I have grown with them. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've evolved and iterated over the years, and I've followed along with all those iterations. So it's like it's a very comfortable place to be. But I loaded up Inkscape, and I was like, I don't know about this. This is really hard. But here's the funny part: I was digging through some archive, some old backups of stuff, and I found my old Windows 2000 edition of Adobe Illustrator, Illustrator 9 from like 1999. Um,
Whoa.
and I was like, will this even work on my Windows 10 machine? And I loaded it up, and it did. I got it to install. And it's been, I mean, we're talking about like an 18-year-old piece of software. And when I saw the interface, I was like, oh, this is clunky. This looks so clunky compared to now. And then I was like, Inkscape, you look pretty all right.
That's fantastic.
And so then when I opened up Inkscape, I'm like, actually, this looks like a lot more manageable now that I've seen like where I was coming from. So I did reopen it, and I've been messing around with it again, and it's not bad. It's not bad. I don't know if it's ready to replace, or if I'm ready to do lettering in it just yet, because I was doing all my lettering in Illustrator before.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty great for just doing like simple. Like I was doing some vector shapes for some die cut stuff that I'm going to do with some upcoming mini comics, and Yeah, the interface is actually pretty grokkable. And that one's free and open source, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and it runs on a lot of platforms. It has a little quirkiness if you want to run it on a Mac, but you can get it installed on there as well. It's I've used it. I had a fairly open source tool set about 10 years ago. That was my main workflow, but then different clients and work and the winds of that change went toward, no, got to standardize on Adobe stuff again. And but it was always in my back pocket, right? And it's a nice app. I know some game engines use it for layout. It's because it's very scriptable and very open. And what's funny is I used it for a few website layouts and mock-ups, some business card mock-ups and things, or no, actual production stuff. But again, like a decade ago, right? And the UI hasn't changed much since, which is a reminder that like open source tools go through like whatever is fashionable for them. It's not the same as what drives design choices in your sort of flagship paid for software, right?
Explain how.
Because I mean, clearly, like just following what other apps are doing isn't a priority, right? For Inkscape, right? It's just build useful stuff. And I mean, and I'm not a part of that project. I'm just saying, as an observer, who I hadn't opened that app in years, and I was like, oh, there's all those tools. They're exactly where they were, and
Okay.
it didn't change its color palette to go more trendy or whatever. I don't know. It just, to me, that sends a signal of it's less about changing to drive demand and appearance of new value versus just let's make core tools that work, right? And so in the core of the vector workflow, it has the tools that get the job done.
And like Medibang, a key thing that I noticed that made me feel like I could trust the application a lot more was when I saw the variety of formats it could work with. I was like, oh, you can open PDFs. Oh, you can open AI files. Oh, you can export it as an SVG or as like what was it called, like an object cutting tool file, like a DXF file.
Oh yeah.
So like for things like those, like what are those die cutters called?
Well, you have like laser cutters or the I can't believe I'm forgetting what it's called. They're not a router, but it's essentially a
CNC router.
CNC. Yeah, I mean, so CNC machines that that essentially they work a lot like a or like a cutter actually as well, like a silhouette cutter, that kind of thing. You typically can have, vector files are fantastic with those, with those formats because they're scalable without losing, details. And each one of those different things, like a router or a cutter, typically has its own app environment that you load stuff in, and something like an SVG is often an acceptable format. That, I mean, Inkscape, it's isn't that its default format, SVG?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, that versatility counted for a lot. But I guess that just makes sense. If you're doing something open source, you want it to play nice with as many things as possible. Whereas like, there's like Adobe apps. Like Adobe has some different drawing apps for the mobile phones. And they look really neat, and they look like they could be fun to play with. But then it's like, oh, and you can share your files with your other Adobe applications. Can I also share it with Medibank? No, you can't. You can share it with Adobe You can share it with both kinds of applications, Photoshop and Illustrator.
Yeah. I mean, I still have an Adobe membership, but even then, I like to be aware of these other tools.
I hope I don't come off as being hostile towards Adobe. It's that closed in thing that I get really claustrophobic about.
I
that.
don't blame you. I mean, it's I'm not an Adobe citizen without question, right? I highly question it, and it's justifiable enough. The upgrade path, I mean, they do extract more money out of me than they did in the prior licensing I used to have. So trade-offs.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else that you've been using that you wanted to highlight?
Let's see, other things I've been using. I mean, I use a lot of open source tools, but from the coding side of things, especially like things in the prototyping stuff with Raspberry Pi and the Raspbian OS, which is based on Debian, which is a flavor of Linux. And it's that's just a wonderful ecosystem. If you've never had the chance to just play with a Linux machine, if you have some machine available that like an older laptop, a PC that you don't mind dual booting, or just something like that, to get a taste of that experience and notice, like, well, yeah, there are a lot of trade-offs. You might run into needing problems with relearning, like, well, how do I navigate the file system, or how do I get apps, and where do I get them, and why, how can I trust these apps, and all that, how that stuff works. But what's neat is that there's literally nothing about it that's meant to be hidden from you. And so if you're into that and exploring why and how, you can lift up the hood and explore, like, how does this community work? Where does the software come from? All that, none of it's shut off to you. Then there's also what does it feel like being on a platform where pretty much all your needs are taken care of for free? That's a neatly weird feeling.
Yeah, and in my experience, at least, as a matter of fact, the software I'm using to route all of the audio that we do on the show, at least on my end, is a freeware. I don't know if it's open source. It's freeware, but they ask for donations, and I happily donated because it solved so many problems and it met all of my needs, like, very effectively. And they provide me with really good documentation to say, like, this is how to use the thing to do the thing you want to do. It's called Voice Meter Banana. It's a weird piece. It's a weird name for the software, but it's like VB Audio Software is the company. But once I loaded it up and saw what it could do for the LIA Cast, I'm like, here, take money, man. That was terrific what you guys just did. Now the software, every time I load it, it gives me a donate prompt, just like CyberDuck. Remember CyberDuck, the FTP client?
Oh, sure. This is, yeah. I mean, well, a classic business model was freeware, like you mentioned that in the title of this episode. And so freeware / shareware were ways of in a way it was like busking but as an app, where it'd be like, hi, please pay for this. CyberDuck doesn't exist without money, or whatever they would say in a little pop-up box when you launch the app. And I mean, even things like Doom, the video game, that started out as freeware.
Oh, did it?
Mm-hmm. Yep. You've got the just one level for free, Knee Deep in the Dead, I think, and then but to get the rest, you had to pay, and then they would send you diskettes in the mail. But then,
oh my gosh,
yeah. Anyway.
Speaking of diskettes, like I mentioned, I was going through some old backups and archives of my stuff, and I found like a box of like 30 zip disks. And I'm like, surely iOmega zip drives, like those 100 megabyte drives, which at the time was like such a leap in technology. Like, oh, you could fit 100 diskettes on this thing. What was it, like the mid 90s when those really kind of came to prominence? And I was like, surely I didn't throw out my zip drive. And I've been hunting all over my house for that zip drive. I want to find out what's on that stuff, but I don't even know if it'll even run on my machine, right? Like, can you even get like a Windows 10 iOmega driver to run?
I'd be willing to bet you that the open source ecosystem has probably addressed that, where there's likely no money in it, right? And then, but there's passion and need and expertise, and that's where all of a sudden weird little islands of cool stuff emerge in that free ecosystem. I would bet. I don't know though, but
Nate Marcel is asking us if we remember Dog Waffle. Do you remember Dog Waffle?
Yeah, I never played with that. I mean, I saw it mentioned in like Imagine FX magazine, but yeah, that was like a digital painting app, but I don't know anything about it.
Oh.
Yep.
I feel like we're coming up on final thought.
Yeah, I think so. And I think we had a fun final thought proposed, but I don't know. That sounds like a big one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking, Rob? We could try it. You know, it's always fun to like take a swing at something that might be, you know, eyes bigger than our stomachs kind of thing.
Sure.
So like what is the option that you had listed there, Rob?
Oh, I was thinking the one that was proposed in the chat earlier.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that one?
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. It seems like just such a big one, right?
It is a big one. It's one that could be like an entire topic, and it's one where I'd actually want, like, so Nate was asking us before we started recording, like, if you ever worked with an agent. I feel like that's such a big one that I would actually want to get an agent on the show.
Yeah,
talk about it.
Exactly. That's a big one. That'd be fantastic to do.
Because I mean, like, yeah, we can do all the hearsay we want, but I'd rather actually hear it from an agent, like what it's like to, you know, work with them and what they expect and what that relationship is like and how you even contact them and find them. So Nate, we will look into that and see what we can dig up as far as like getting a potential guest in that regard. Not impossible. But we had a final thought proposed in the notes, which was, well, let me read it. What's the catch? What big problems remain with using open source tools? Old tech? Question mark.
Oh, what were you thinking there we go. I like it. Let's what's the catch? That's like almost a final thought generator, just always asking, well, okay, this is all fine and well. What's the catch?
All right. Okay, so in about a minute or two, we'll get started on that, and then we'll close out the show with that thought. But before we do that, we got to thank some more people who make this show possible, and those people happen to be us. We think hard about this stuff because we make stuff. And in the making of stuff, we have reflections, observations, and we bring it to the show. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about a few of the things that we make. First up is Science Comics Rockets Defying Gravity. There's 2 colons in that title. Science Comics, Rockets, Defying Gravity. Out June 12th, 2018 from First Second Books. What is it? It is a graphic novel for middle grade and up. And I really do... we did work really hard. My wife Ann and I made this book, this graphic novel. Graphic novel? It's not a graphic novel. It's nonfiction. It's a comics documentary about the history and science of rockets as told by the animals who participated in rocket history. So they're the hosts of the show. So imagine Carl Sagan's Cosmos series or Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmos series. You know, he tells all those little stories about scientists who overcame all these different difficulties to make these great discoveries that wound up improving everybody's lives. That's what these animals are doing, but they're also telling the stories of how the animals were involved in the discovery. So, for instance, like how do we learn about how G-force affects the human body when you eject from a supersonic plane and there's a massive deceleration on your body? Surely that's got to do some bad things to you. Well, you know, we don't often put humans in the front line of that kind of thing. So they tranquilized some grizzly bears and put them in planes and shot them out in ejector seats. Don't worry, they all survived until they were euthanized and dissected. There's stories like that in there in Science Comics Rockets Defying Gravity. Again, it's out June 12th, 2018. It's up for pre-order now on Amazon. Rob, you make a...
I just got to say a little more. It's a wonderful book, and it's obviously it's beautiful. It's a lot of fun. So there's so much humor, yet it reminds me of the best kind of like science learning you can find, where you're gonna laugh, but you're gonna have a lot better understanding of physics as you go. And there's just nothing better. I think everyone listening should pre-order it.
Well, thanks for saying that, Rob. Yes, Rob was a beta reader, so he has privileged information. He actually he's thanked in the acknowledgments page because contributed in a substantial way to helping fix some problems that we had with the book early on. Yes, so that's
very kind. And but yeah, I'm that's very humbling, and I'm excited about it. It is really a lot of fun. Like anyone who just thinks about like, oh, I want to build a Lego rocket, or I think space travel is cool, or I think satellites are amazing. I mean, anything that's related to how we get off of this Earth with rocket stuff that causes a lot of neat things. Like if your imagination goes there, then you just got to get this book.
Oh, thanks for saying that. So let's talk about that game that you make, Rob. And while you talk about This Panda Needs You, I'm going to see if I can load up the software, or the game itself, because I have it. I own it. I purchased it, and let's find out why everybody else should purchase it too.
Yeah, sounds great. So This Panda Needs You is a game that's available on a bunch of different platforms, and it's a mellow shape matching block stacking game. Little bit of physics, nothing wild like rockets and stuff in it, right? But the situation is this panda encounters like a stack of shapes, and they're in a pattern. They may have one color, but they may have a bunch of colors in different shapes. It's all great, but a cloud comes along, knocks them all down, and your job is to help this little panda put things right. And as you go along, the levels get harder and harder, but very slowly. There's like over 50 levels, and the patterns just get more complex, more blocks, different kinds of blocks, and all that stuff. The thing about this, in a way, I built it to, well, in response to an inspiring game design that my wife came up with, and I wanted to see if it entertained people that I like, that I actually love, right? My kids. And what's super funny is that once in a while they get in situations, like recently we were doing a little bit of traveling, and my little one, my youngest, my 4-year-old, she was playing this on her iPad, and she had this like victory celebrate, like, yes, because every time that she put all the blocks right, she would be like, I did it, and I got it. And that's the whole point of like just having a fun time solving a little puzzle. And it's a little extra, hip hip hooray when a panda's dancing and celebrating along with you. So there you go. It's for iPhone, iPad, Android phones and tablets, and Mac OS, and Windows. Mac and Windows, go to itch.io and search for This Panda Needs You, and the rest you can go get convenient links via this-panda.com.
And if you have purchased it already, tell a friend, or give it a rating on whatever platform you purchased it. That helps more people find it. That sends a signal to the internet saying, hey, look over here. This thing's important. Pre-ordering rockets on Amazon, or giving a review to This Panda. Both those things are super helpful, and they don't cost you anything extra. But let's suppose that you're really saying like, okay, well, that's nice that you guys make stuff, and I'm very proud of you, but we're really here because the way you guys think about stuff. Fair enough. The way we think about stuff, in the way we express it on the show, is itself a product, and we have more of those kinds of things at leadintoart.com/workshops, where you can find self-contained video series that we've created that you can download at a price of your choosing, even free. You can get it for free, but if you get some value out of it, a great thing you could do is then go back and purchase it, maybe purchase it for a friend. It's like giving us a tip for something that we made that actually positively affected you. And that's at leadintoart.com/workshops. If you're watching the video now on YouTube, giving us a thumbs up helps more people find the show. If you're listening to this as a podcast, giving it a 5-star review helps more people find the show as well. And we thank everybody who's been doing all of those things. It means a lot to us.
It really does. Thank you. So,
final thought.
Talking about what might the catch be to all this free, wonderful magic. Here you go. You've got free tools that are open, free tools that are open enough, and okay, now what? Have you ever had this create a problem? Have had a barrier pop up related to this?
Have I? Well, okay. I haven't updated GIMP in a while. I have it installed on my Windows machine. I remember the upgrade process was not the most elegant thing in the entire world. Like, so like as far as catches, I don't know if I would call it a catch, but more of a trade-off, right? Like if I buy something from the iOS App Store, the Windows App Store, the Android, Google Play Store, whatever, it just auto updates and I don't have to think about it too much, which is kind of nice and very like comfortable. And it's like, oh well, the operating system automatically upgrades now, so it's like, oh, now we got iOS 11. And then like right after that happened, Hindenburg Mobile, this podcasting app, the app that I used to record like my microcast, like Thunder Punch Daily and Fabulous Secrets, like within days it updated to like be, to operate well with iOS 11, right? If updating programs like Medibang and GIMP are not as easy. Like I have to go to their website, I have to download the exe file, I have to launch it, and which doesn't sound like that sounds like a real first world problem. I got to click 3 times, but but also it's like sometimes it's I don't know, like I have to double check to like, is this up to date? I don't even know anymore. I don't have like a simple like interface to look at, say like your app is up to date. It's like, do you have version 10.1.6.2 point B point X? I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that's ever like been a friction point, if you can call it that.
I think there are mild things, yeah, I think related to the distribution and updating. One thing that I can think of is, so on in Mac OS, if a developer of an app doesn't have a developer account with that give them an identity and certificates they can use to sign software that they build, then and package that appropriately with the app. So then if I download and install it, there's sort of this verification of, oh, Apple knows who created this app. And if Apple doesn't know who created the app, there's a bit of there are hoops to jump through where that naturally comes up when an app doesn't have the budget of, hi, we're a free app and I'm not going to pay for a license to be a developer on Mac OS, right? And that has trade-offs. So you definitely, like, what does that really buy you? What does that mean? Because does it mean that the developer is of a lesser skill or is going to do something like, dangerous or malicious just because they don't have a certificate they bought from Apple? Not really. It shows that it sends a money signal. I don't know, right? And I tend to not worry about that too much when I trust the source of an app. But it's a friction point. It's not like this giant roadblock.
Well, what trade-offs have you noticed, or catches have you noticed in the past?
Well, that catch where it's like, oh, this is created. We don't know who this developer is, right? This is an unsigned app. Now what, right? So you have to go through and say, like, allow this to install anyway, whatever. If, or not. Let's see. There was an animation app that I actually chose not to because I couldn't learn enough about it. Where I got over that little doubt. Right. So then here we go. The friction point was, well, there was an animation app that I didn't try. That didn't really, I didn't get to audition like others that I was exploring. I ended up landing on Creature by Kestrel Moon Studios, and that one is definitely a paid for app. But that's let's see. So let's see. Friction point.
Have you ever had an open source app like reach an endpoint where it's no longer supported by the developing community? Because the fact that it's open source means that other people can pick it up and run with it. But has there ever been an example that you've run into where somebody just stops, like the community just gives up on it?
Nothing that important. Nothing that where there wasn't like a natural thing to just hop over to. There have been kerfuffles, like ownership of the, like back in the day, Open Office, when it went from it was an independent project, and then I don't know. At some point, it got a bad. There was a reaction from the community that said, "Nope, this isn't. That's not our thing." And then all of a sudden, a new one popped up, LibreOffice. So, so there tends to be just it's a different conversation. I think that's the it's. I don't think it's. I could come up with any particular showstopper that would say the open and or free approach to software is not palatable. I remember, so let's see, Ubuntu is a popular Linux distribution that they chose to allow affiliate links from Amazon to be part of your desktop search as a way to fund the project, right? That had a big backlash where it's so there's these tensions that happen in the community, and you'll end up needing to think, which way do you want to go with that? But I can't think of being stranded though. It's like the outcome is never.
The only example I can think of is Android ROMs, right? Like when I first switched to Android phones, and I got really excited about like rooting my phones and putting custom ROMs or custom operating systems on, made by developers, and like what happened with CyanogenMod, right?
Oh, what happened with CyanogenMod?
Well, didn't they got, so it was. See, maybe I shouldn't have brought it up because I'm not sure if I understand the full history properly. But didn't they get purchased by a company, and then the development stopped on CyanogenMod? Somebody's going to correct me on this, but it was like independently developed, and then if I remember right, it got purchased by a bigger company, and then something.
Okay. Yeah, there's a Lifehacker article about it. Yep.
Okay. But then also like, and I think this has to do with like the life cycle of the technology of phones. Like, so I have like an LG Optimus, right? From like what, 2005, no, it'd be like 2008, right? It'd be an old, like first gen. It had gingerbread installed on it, right? and I put a custom ROM on it, which is like every once in a while I boot the phone up just to like, do you still work? And it totally still works. It takes like 9 minutes to boot, but it's like, try finding support for a ROM on an LG Optimus, 256 megabyte memory phone, right?
I think depending on where you go with these two, like, so that is sometimes big events happen. And I do think probably there's a bit of a theme around the large events, and it's likely acquisitions and project takeovers and purchases and stuff. And maybe that's a bit of a theme of our episode here too, is that business model matters for your tools, and it's worth having at least some awareness of where these tools are currently at with how they're funded, and if that is part of why it's working for you. And then if it changes, then maybe that'll be fine, or maybe that won't. But I don't know. It's not like I haven't been stranded a lot with this. A negative that I've found, like I ended up going back into the Adobe stuff, which it's a nice world. It has evolved a lot in the last decade, but like it's not a cheap world, right? It's definitely it's $50 a month if you want to have their a lot of their suite, right? And that's kind of the trade-off, is like you may be serving in a world where it's not, those open tools are not as compatible with team workflows, team knowledge. They're like, some people are like, no, I'm comfortable with this common thing that I learned, and I don't worry about learning a new thing, whatever, right? Depends on who you're serving and where you're working. So that's, I don't know. I don't call that a showstopper. It can coexist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see the use case for either situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I think we did a podcast.
Okay.
We walked around it enough. So thank you, Rob, for this discussion. This was a fun one again.
Thank you,
And
Jerzy.
this show is recorded every Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, streamed live on YouTube, and then collected as an audio and video podcast at patreon.com/leanintoart. And we will be back next week with another discussion on visual storytelling topics. Until then, I have been Jerzy Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jerzy on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter and Instagram.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay, bye.
Can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to stop the stream. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you.